John Lear, son of Learjet inventor William Lear, is one of the world's most decorated aviators. His revelations were instrumental in exposing the covert activities at Area 51.
I think they used it as an underground area to hide recovered discs as early as 1948 or 49. They're here, they have an agenda, and there's not the slightest thing we can do about it. With at least 35 separate different craft, we were being visited by at least 10 different species of aliens.
Lear 18 is the granddaddy of UFO conspiracy stories.
John Lear is an interesting man with an interesting background, associations with various intelligence agencies, and I owe him a debt of gratitude because he did help me when I initially began my UFO
He told
research.
you he was at the scene of a UFO crash. What's his name? John Lear came to the station with a pile of UFO documents and was trying to interest our managing editor in doing a story about UFOs.
The government established an intensive program of ridicule against anyone who said they saw flying saucers.
Airline Captain John Lear suspects the government has known
Fear
since
of ridicule
1947.
was the foundation on which the cover-up was placed.
Lear hinted that he knew someone who had intimate knowledge of the saucer program, and so I kept bugging him to allow us to meet this person, which turned out to be Bob Lazar.
In 1989, Bob Lazar, a nuclear physicist, came forward with a fantastic story. He claimed he had worked on recovered alien craft at a top-secret government facility.
It's kind of a long story how I became employed at that facility south of Area 51. It's called S4. I was originally employed at Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico. While at Los Alamos Labs, I ran into Dr. Edward Teller. Edward Teller was essentially the father of the hydrogen bomb. It was he who came up with the original concept of the fusion device. I sent a resume out to him. He put in a good word for me, and I was granted an interview.
He came over here after one or two of them. He would say, John, they said that you're just interested in being my friend to get information on the F-117. I said, no, that's true. That's not true. I'm just interested in UFOs.
Well, we had to sign an agreement essentially relieving us of our constitutional rights. Usually if you're employed by someone, it's very clear as to who's in charge. But the way things were set up here, I don't know. I know on my pay stub, it was from the Department of Naval Intelligence.
In December 1988, Bob came in the evening, sat down in that chair. I was writing out bills. And he says, John, I saw a disc today. And I said, what? And he said, I saw a disc today. And I said, theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. And I said, you saw a flying site. Did you go up to the test site? And he said, yeah, I just got back. I said, then what are you doing here? And I said, they obviously followed you. Why don't you find out what's going on and then tell us?
Close range, what I witnessed, craft approximately 52 feet in diameter, 15 feet high. It's quite an unbelievable sight to see something that size lift completely silently. Later on, I was allowed inside the craft to see how the reactor was placed and how the gravity amplifiers were configured inside there. That was phenomenal feeling. Entering the seats inside the craft were much smaller than a human could use. It was obvious that this was not meant for people to fly in. There was only one vehicle that I worked on, though there were 9 total in different states of repair or disrepair. We really don't know how the fuel was manufactured. We just know that it was in the craft, and we were actively trying to find out what reaction it was undergoing to produce the energy to drive the craft.
I remember a particular evening in January. Bob came in, his eyes were bright. He said, John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien. And I said, you're kidding. It couldn't have been a midget. No. Couldn't have been a doll. No. That was it. He was absolutely positive.
What I did see was what I believe to be autopsy photos. It was a creature, and its chest was cut open in a T fashion, the skin peeled back. There were also photos of one single large organ that was removed. That was also cut up and being weighed. Whether or not they're absolutely authentic, I can't say. I can only assume because I was working on a craft that I know to be of alien in nature, that the other material that came along with it was probably authentic also. I had the test flight schedule for what was going on down at S4.
I said, well, how can we see it? He said, I know we can a place where we can drive in. And we no sooner got out of the motorhome when this thing came up behind the mountain. From that distance, it was just a light. But when I got the Celestron 8 focused in on it, it was a flying saucer.
And just a few minutes ago, we saw one of the government extraterrestrial UFOs fly over there. We all watched it for about 7 or 8 minutes. We're going to stay here for another couple hours here to see if we can show you folks an actual extraterrestrial flying saucer being flown by the government.
They perform maneuvers that were not aerodynamically possible with any other craft, and the fact that it glowed, which happened to be a byproduct of how the craft operated.
We're looking at a craft that was traveling huge distances, both to the left and the right, instantaneously.
Because we got away with it that night, it kind of became a habit, more or less, to keep going out there. And on one night, we got caught.
We had Geiger counters, film, video cameras, still cameras, everything. I started setting up the telescope, and about that time, the Broncos come up and said, you know, what are you guys doing here?
The following day, I was taken in for debriefing and threatened, and really that's when the falling out more or less started with me and the people at S4. The day just ended, the notes were taken and other people were brought in, and I left wondering exactly what was going to happen.
20 miles from Area 51, along Highway 375 in the small town of Rachel, locals have noted mysterious and disturbing events for years.
People gathered here to discuss the sightings that they'd had. In most places, you can't talk about that kind of thing. You can't find a place to go.
That big around, and kind of the color maybe of a flashlight, but a long streak as it came through.
I saw a yellowish-white bright light rise up from the hill back over in this direction, skyward, hang motionless for 2 or 3 minutes, then slowly start to descend.
Between 89 and let's say 94, every time I came out, I saw something.
It would do a circle and it would go straight up, then it would drop, and it'd go left or right.
Well, I'll tell you, I covered organized crime here in this city for a number of years. I have dealt with a lot of mob witnesses who told me that they were afraid of being bumped off by the mob. People are more afraid of our government than they are of organized crime. They're worried they're going to get killed.
I was constantly followed. My friends were harassed, shot at.
When he got his tire shot out on the freeway, this was the first place he came. And he said, I'm going to turn myself in. I said, relax, just, stay here for a while.
The news director and I went up to John Lear's home and met Lazar. We interviewed him for a period of several hours and were convinced this is a really interesting story.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of On the Record. Groom Lake, Nevada is one of the most secretive spots on the planet. It's located on the northeast edge of the Nevada test site and is said to be where numerous top-secret weapons systems have been tested over the years. According to some UFO researchers, it's also where the government is test flying alien spacecraft.
Well, there's 9 flying saucers of extraterrestrial origin that are out there. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all.
What about aliens? Any of those up there at Groom Lake?
I really want to steer away from that right now.
The first interview I did on TV was in silhouette. Everyone knew what I looked like at S4, but I didn't want to push back too much. I just wanted to say, hey, leave me alone, and it was hands off after that. No one had followed me. It had the desired effect. Everything stopped immediately. Most of my documents, as far as my past history, vanished, and that was not a natural occurrence.
Further harassment by the authorities brought Bob Lazar to court facing minor charges of pandering. The judge found it almost impossible to determine his identity.
That shows that he worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence. I also note that he is in fact listed in the Los Alamos National Laboratory telephone directory. It's obvious that it's very difficult to get information on Mr. Lazar from government sources, enormously.
Well, we can't verify his education background. The claims for a master's degree from MIT and Caltech simply cannot prove it. He can't come up with any diplomas, can't come up with any professors, can't come up with any classmates who would verify his story.
Trying to make me a non-person, something where I couldn't prove my background, so anything I said, really wouldn't be listened to.
However, I have been able to verify a lot of things about his background. that makes sense. We know he worked at Los Alamos Lab. He knew about the existence of a place called S4. Well, I confirmed with the government there really is a place called S4. I had never heard about it before. They say it exists. They just won't tell me where it is.
When the Lazar story broke in '89, the UFO watchers swarmed around this area, and they discovered two hills. One of them is called Whitesides Mountain. It's the mountain with the white sides in the distance. And the other one, discovered more recently, was Freedom Ridge. Both these hills offered a clear view across the valley of this base that doesn't exist, which created a lot of embarrassment.
Within the past year, the government seized an additional 4,000 acres of land around Groom Lake, the land on which people would peer down on the base. I have interviewed now more than 24 people who have worked at that facility, who all tell me bits and pieces of the same story. That story being, we've seen these disc-shaped craft. Some of them have just seen these things sitting in a hangar. Some of them have seen them in flight. But clearly that many people telling you that they've seen something over and over again over all that time period suggests that something really is going on out there. And there are a number of photographs that have been taken out there of odd objects in the sky, disc-shaped objects. There are videos that were taken out there by people who are out in the desert looking to see what they can see.
We're about 2 miles from the military border now on public land. I used to map these sensors, record their locations using the radio, and then if you want to sneak around, all you have to do is simply pull the power plug, and you're free to pass by. And then after you've passed by, you put the power plug back on. These cables here are connected to magnetic cylinders buried beside the road on either side, and I'll show you them. Follow this cable under here. There you have the sensor unit. This detects any big piece of metal going by. There are live guards on the top of various of these hills that are always there 24 hours a day. Their only job is to watch the desert.
The saucers are in fact gone from Area 51 because too many people are out there in the desert looking for it.
No, I'm quite sure that testing stopped years ago. I doubt very much that the base is even any longer there. The remnants of it might be.
One of the earliest locations to be suggested as a possible storage place is the facility at Pine Gap in Australia, because of the top secret facilities that are already there.
Where would I put him? I'd put him in the South Pacific.
Cover-up probably started for pretty good reasons back in the late 1940s when the modern UFO era began. It's likely that our country really didn't know what was going on. We didn't know where these things were from, what they were here for, what they wanted from us. And there probably really was a danger that there might be an outbreak of panic if the public were told that these things are from somewhere else. But so many lies have been told over the years since then that I think that once the cover-up is exposed, if in fact that ever happens, that some of these military people would go to jail.
The government is in a holding status quo. They're just waiting for whatever the aliens are going to do.
They are actively and have in their possession alien spacecraft, and they are actively undergoing analysis.
And flying them?
And flying them.
Bob Lazar is an engineer and physicist who says he worked on flying saucers for the U.S. government at Area 51. He drew these sketches of one of 9 different saucers he says the government has in a secret warehouse. Lazar gave the saucers each names according to their various shapes. Top Hat, the Sport Model, the Jello Mold. Called in to help figure out how they work, Lazar says the saucers are powered by an antimatter generator, fueled with an element which he says could only have come from another planet.
They set up and produce their own gravitational field. Just as the Earth holds all matter down, they produce that same field, but out of phase, and it repels itself. The effects that can cause, the way in which everything operates is by all intents and purposes, magic. I mean, it is so far beyond our level of technology.
Now, before you toss Lazar on the pile with all the other UFO wackos, understand that he willingly agreed to take a lie detector test, requested and independently arranged by a Las Vegas reporter. Terry Tabernetti is the ex-cop who administered the test.
If he's lying, he ought to be in Hollywood, because he gave absolutely no physiological indications of attempting deception.
Lazar says he was referred to his government job by Dr. Edward Teller, the renowned scientist who helped develop the atomic bomb. But in a rare interview with Inside Report, Teller insisted he doesn't know Lazar, or at least doesn't remember him.
I think it appears that someone's trying to wipe him out.
George Knapp is the Las Vegas TV reporter who first aired Bob Lazar's amazing claims. He says he ran into unusual problems just trying to look into Lazar's background. Though Lazar claimed to have once worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, government officials denied they knew anything about him. But when Knapp came up with a phone directory listing Lazar's name, Los Alamos grudgingly admitted he had spent some time there. Officials at the hospital where Lazar was born even denied the simple fact he was born there, until Knapp tracked down the doctor who delivered Lazar.
I find Bob to be credible, and the main reason is because the story hasn't changed. It's stayed from the beginning. It's been the same. It hasn't expanded like some of these UFO tales you hear. It's been the same, and we've been through a lot of different interview sessions, many on camera, many more off camera, and it stayed exactly the same, consistent.
But even inside the community of UFO believers, there are many who are skeptical of Bob Lazar's claims. Nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman says Lazar may indeed be the real thing, but he says he can also believe Lazar might be a hoaxer, or worse yet, a government agent spreading false stories designed to cover more important secrets.
I find Bob Lazar as somebody who isn't silly, who doesn't say totally stupid things, who comes across well. But I certainly, until I get verification, cannot endorse the legitimacy of what he is saying.
Bob Lazar says he quit his job working on the government saucers when his bosses began harassing him because he was letting others in on the big secret. But now that others are greeting his claims with skepticism and outright hostility, he says he wishes he just kept his big mouth shut. Lazar says he never took the idea of breaking security lightly. He just wanted to let the world in on a story he says we all should have been told.
Why keep a secret about probably one of the most important events in history, that there's been contact from an alien civilization? It's a significant event in history, more significant than anything.